all go around and introduce ourselves first. So I'm Kirsten Kirby. I'm coming to you from the witch city of Salem, Massachusetts, where I live. I've been in health professions advising for about 15 years. I've advised students at Johns Hopkins University, Franklin and Marshall College, and I'm currently the Associate Director of Student Advising at New England College of Optometry, working with students who are earning their 4-year Doctor of Optometry degree. I've also worked with physician leaders at the American College of Physicians, which is the leading professional association for internal medicine physicians. And I come from a medical family. Lots of people in my family are doctors, and having lots of good conversations with my dad, who's a pathologist and chief of the autopsy service at Christiana Healthcare System in Delaware. So that's what led he and I to write our book, Your White Coat is Leading, Vital Advice for Pre-Meds, which you guys are all going to get a free copy of, courtesy of the conference. But I'm just really excited to be here and excited to join all of these amazing panelists and getting to speak with you this morning about some of the different strategies that you can employ, both when you're building a body of work to become a competitive applicant, and then when you're actually going through the application cycle. So I will let one of my other panelists introduce themselves.
Okay, well, I am Quo Vadis Webster, more commonly known as Miss QV, and I'm the director of the pre-med program at Xavier University in New Orleans. Xavier has been a leader for over 25 years in placing African-American students, Black students into medical school and graduating our alumni from U.S. medical schools. This is my 20th year advising pre-meds at Xavier. It is an awesome job, a rewarding job. Every 4 years, I'm able to get announcements of graduations of so many Xavier students who are completing programs in medicine, dentistry, optometry, etc. And so we have a really, really structured program at the university that actually starts the Friday before classes begin in August of the freshman year and continues consistently on a very strategic basis throughout enrollment. We're letting our students what they should be doing every step of the way, when they should be doing it, what they should be doing so that they have the most competitive applications possible. I'm a Xavier grad 2 times. I received my bachelor's degree and my counseling degree and a master's degree in counseling from the university. And I am pleased to be with you to share some of the insight that I've amassed over the years, and hopefully you can find it useful as you plan to go on this journey into gaining admission into med school and hopefully doing what is necessary to make sure you successfully complete medical school, because getting in is one thing. We want to make sure you have the tools to also successfully complete your respective programs.
I'll go next. I am Marissa Sheaf. I'm the Director of Health Professions Advising at Franklin and Marshall College. I've been here at FNM about 3 years. Prior to being at Franklin and Marshall, I was at the University of Pennsylvania. I was there for about 7 or 8 years, and that was really my first foray into health professions advising. I worked specifically with undergraduate nursing students to kind of help them persist from the time that they got into the program, both undergrad and accelerated students, throughout the program, and then working with them to decide what they wanted to do after they graduated. So that could be a nurse practitioner, that could be going into public health, that could be going into medical school, and kind of all the different tracks that they can pursue after they've finished. And then I also had a lot of exposure working with all populations from the university of all different backgrounds, as well as with the graduate public health students. So I spent a lot of time there. While I was there, I got my graduate degree at Penn in counseling, and kind of found my way to Lancaster. After my husband and I moved here, I commuted to Philadelphia for about 2.5 years from Lancaster, which I'm so glad I'm not doing that anymore. And my husband still commutes to Harrisburg. So Lancaster was kind of the middle spot for us, and that's where we kind of decided. And I'm so glad, because I work with a really great group of students at Franklin and Marshall. The alumni network is incredible. So for those of you who are tuning in from FNM, hopefully all of you know me. I meet with prospective students, talking with them from the point that they're deciding to come to college and then all the way through from the time that they graduate. And that, as I tell a lot of you, and I think we'll talk about today, is oftentimes alum that have been out of school for a year or two or that are applying in their senior year. So it's really fun to kind of see individuals go through the gamut of starting as high school freshman students and then seeing them mature as time goes on, and seeing them working and wanting to go kind of back to medical school. So I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues across the country, and I'm looking forward to talking with all of you today.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sunny Nakae. I'm Associate Dean for Student Affairs and Associate Professor of Social Medicine, Population, and Public Health at University of California, Riverside School of Medicine. So I'm on Pacific time. I was talking with Marissa that it's quite early where I am, but I'm so happy to join everyone. I'm on this panel to provide maybe a dean's perspective, and I've been working with pre-med students for my entire career. I love as QV said, I love watching students grow and become physicians. I'm also really passionate about academic medicine, which is sort of where I am. I'm not an MD. I have a PhD in higher education, but I want to see more students going into academic medicine and becoming leaders and decision makers in this field. So I also wrote a book, and it's coming out in November. And I wanted to highlight the stories and communities that I've been working with for 20 years, which is re-applicants, post-bac students, students of color, women, first-generation students, undocumented students, and put in the stories of those students by way of kind of giving advice through storytelling. And so it has some vignettes. It's short. It's very today's reader friendly to try to give you short chapters and pieces of advice, but it's also meant to shift the focus from what do I need to do to get into medical school to who do I need to be someone's doctor. So a journey of joy and personal development rather than thinking about the competition. And it certainly attends to technical advice, but I always really try to shift the focus, as Ms. QV was saying, to this big picture, right? So what are you gonna do when you get there and what's in front of you? And I have to say, Dr. Sharice Hamblin, who's the founder of Patients Are Waiting, was one of my students at Northwestern years ago, and we kept in touch. So she's one of those amazing people who's now doing amazing things like this conference. And one of her really good friends is also a former student of mine that I've kept in touch with. And that's Dr. Wendy Goodall McDonald, who's a Xavier alum.
Xavier, yes.
Super, super awesome, all things full circle. Really fun. Glad to be here.
Well, students, feel free to put whatever questions you want in the chat. So you heard we all have really different backgrounds but can give you advice on a variety of things. So you can put whatever questions in there you want. But I guess one question we may be able to start with is, how do medical schools actually assess applicants? Because I think one of the questions I used to get a lot was, how are they going to look at this part of my application or this part, and how is this piece going to be perceived? So maybe that's a good question for us to start with. I'll just throw that out. I can answer last.
Well, I'll go with the way we conceptualize that process for Xavier students. Day one of freshman year, we tell them there are typically 2 questions that admissions committees are trying to answer when they get their applications. And the first one is obvious. Can this student actually handle the academic rigor of medical school? And we let the students know that typically those admissions committees are looking at their undergraduate grades, both BCPM overall, any graduate coursework if applicable, their MCAT scores, and then letters of evaluation from people who taught them. And typically what we tell students is, if the answer to that first question is yes, that's when they usually go to the next question, which is, will this applicant be a good physician? Will this person be an asset to the profession and the future patient population? And typically the items used to answer that question, we inform students, are the personal statements, other essays, the post-secondary experiences, the clinical things, but also the things that they've done outside of the clinical setting to show that they're developing the qualities that would make them good physicians. And that includes those 15 competencies of entering medical students, we start discussing those with students as freshmen so that they can develop themselves both professionally, pre-professionally, and personally based on those 15 competencies, looking at their interactions with faculty, how they interact with their peers, etc. So we start with those two questions informing the process as they prepare throughout enrollment, throughout their tenure at the university. They talk a lot about holistic admissions, and that's fine, but my reality and the seat I've sat in for 20 years at Xavier is typically people aren't looking at your experiences and how great you are until they get past the MCAT and GPAs. And that's just been my experience. So I always tell students to make that the first priority and then work in the rest of those things, the meat of the application really, of who you are as a person and who you will be as a physician.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that QV said. I think, what I tell for those of you that have met with me and have sat with me, what I tell my incoming students is that academics have to come first. It's kind of the, and I get, as pre-med students are coming into college, they're excited, right? They want to get involved and they want to do the clinical work and they want to do all of the extracurriculars that kind of QV mentioned. And I say, your goal as a freshman student or a first year student is to learn how to be a student, get your feet set academically, because the reality is that if you do well academically, you can always tack on more experiences, that clinical exposure, being in service. And the thing about college that I think sometimes students forget, and especially pre-meds, is that you're at college to grow and develop and learn who you are. And so all of these clinical experiences and extracurricular activities, you may not know what you want to do yet. And so that comes oftentimes with time. And I think, Sunny will probably touch on, when admissions committees go to review your application, there's no special sauce. There's not one thing that they're looking for. If there was a special sauce, I promise you, we tell you what it is, but there is none, right? So it's really kind of thinking about, who is this person? What kind of physician are they going to be? And a lot of that comes with the extracurriculars, the service that you did, that really are allowing the admissions committee to see your personality and see who you are. So I think those academics they're the base. Everything comes from that. And, not to kind of, put a little bit of fear in my students, say once they slip, that's the hardest thing to kind of bring back up. Yes. So making sure that you have that base and are aware of kind of all the different things that you need to do, that's kind of where you can start. And I do have, Angela had a question about the classes that you should take in undergrad. There are classes that you would want to take. We call them prerequisite courses. Every med school looks a little bit different in terms of the courses that they're looking for. There are some medical schools, and Sunny can talk to us about her own, that don't necessarily outline exactly what courses that you need, while some others will say specifically the semesters and the hours that you need for specific courses. But in general, the general courses that you need are going to be a couple semesters of biology, typically 2 semesters of chemistry, usually 2 semesters of organic chemistry along with that, a couple physics courses, and then we're seeing a little bit more of things like biochemistry courses, some biobehavior, like psychology, sociology courses. So you're just going to want to make sure that when you're an undergrad, if you have a pre-health advisor, work with them, get to know them. They will walk you through the courses time and time again, and just make sure that you're staying on track with those and just kind of paying attention to what the medical schools are looking for.
Yeah, I definitely, my saying about GPA is that your GPA is not all you need to get in, right? Your GPA is not going to get you in. I'm not going to open your file and go, oh, 4.0 and whatever, and just like, here you go, here's your golden ticket, because the data shows that students with 5.14s and 3.8s, like 13 to 15% of those students don't get in every year. So you're like, wow, they have like the top grades in MCATs and they don't get a seat anywhere in the country as we look at the aggregate data of applicants. But your GPA can keep you out because it can keep you from being considered. So I like to think of the metrics of the application as sort of how far open is the door. Have I worked with students below 3.0 with very average or below average MCATs that have gotten into medical school? Yes, I have. But their options were very limited and it was risky and they might have had to be a reapplicant. So you just don't know. So how much consideration you get in the process is related to initially your academic performance and preparation, which I think is important. And then also just the fit of the school that you're applying to has a lot to do with it. So, my school, for example, is a state school. It's a community-based medical school. So we have a very different mission, and we're looking for a different type of student than maybe a very research-focused medical school, or a school with a different mission that's not like new, for example. So I think doing your homework about the schools and applying to the right focus of schools for what your strengths are is also an important way to get more consideration in the admissions process.
So I certainly agree with all of my fellow panelists' perspective on this. I like to think about the importance of mindset shift as you go into your undergraduate education. So one of the things is this idea of when you are a physician, you're going to be speaking the language of medicine your whole career. And so at each phase of your education, you're trying to become more and more proficient so that then by the time you're out in practice, you're fluent in this language of medicine. So I think instead of thinking about, what do I need to get an A on this test, or what do I need to do to get this certain number, just really thinking about the intellectual curiosity and that idea of this fluency in medicine. So you're learning vocabulary along the way, right? You're learning all these different pieces that are then going to come together to help you be able to care for your patients effectively. So I really agree with what Sunny said at the beginning. It's not just, and QV said this too, it's not just about the getting in, it's about preparing yourself to care for patients. And your knowledge, your wealth of knowledge is one of the most powerful tools that you're going to be able to use in caring for patients. And that's why it's so important for academics to come first. And that's why medical schools really do look at that information. They're not just looking at the numbers either. They're looking at your choices academically. Did you go beyond just those minimum prerequisites? Did you take humanities courses? Even if you didn't do a formal minor in something, maybe you kind of created your own. Mm-hmm. And so I think they look beyond just those numbers to really get some insights into, like I said, that intellectual curiosity piece of things. So I think having that mindset going in of building your knowledge and that knowledge is going to be a powerful tool for you, then in your written application and in your interviews, you're going to really be able to powerfully demonstrate that. And that's the kind of thing that's going to help you stand out from the other thousands of applicants that are in the pool. So looks like a couple of different good questions coming through. So Marissa addressed the questions about what classes to take in undergrad. Grace asked a question. She's currently a senior in high school. How should she prepare during her undergrad years or now in the specific classes? So Marissa touched on this a little. I will say personally, I think it's good to work on your math skills. There are a lot of classes where you're going to have to use those. And so anything you can do in high school and even in your early undergraduate years to get a good foundation in that, even something like inorganic chemistry has some of those components of analytical thinking. So it's beyond just kind of the math subject itself, but you're cultivating that skill set in analytical thinking, being able to analyze data, being able to apply those math skills. I mean, certainly you'll have plenty of physicians kind of say like, oh, you're not going to use that as much, but it's the framework and the way of thinking that you're going to use. So yeah, Grace, I would definitely say as a high school student, brushing up on math is a good thing to do going into undergrad. So any of my other panelists want to weigh in for a high school senior, what they should do?
I would like to weigh in. And when I talk to seniors or even just high school students in general, part of the thing is, regardless of what type of major or undergraduate, or I'm sorry, professional school, grad school path you want to be on as you prepare in college. I find that students are really interested in learning more about how to get scholarships. And so the way that you get scholarships, at least at Xavier, is based on your core high school GPA and your ACT, SAT scores. So by that, I would say that those things are things that you should do not only for scholarships, but to also prepare yourself to have the study skills, the foundation you need to enter into the basic sciences and other pre-med courses that you need in college. So I would encourage you to make sure that you are doing well, mastering the content, learning those study skills in your high school courses, all of your courses, but especially the core courses, so that you have that foundation to transition better into the rigors of college, but also to put yourself in a position to do well on the ACT, SAT, so that too can give you the opportunity to be competitive for scholarships at the universities and colleges that you are considering. Standardized testing will not go away. And I have students who will come in and say, well, I took the ACT, SAT 10 times. Can I do that with the MCAT? No. First of all, you only have 7 chances to take that test in your lifetime, and you want to treat it as though you only have 1 shot. Because the minute you start taking it too many times, meaning the MCAT, schools are going to wonder if there's going to be an issue with you passing USMLE, the licensure examinations that you must take in medical school and beyond medical school. So I say take that ACT, SAT very seriously as well, not just so that you can have a competitive score to get scholarships, but also because these are skills you're going to need to have to strategize and do well once it's time to start formally preparing for the MCAT. And in terms of experience, I recommend that students in high school during the summers, typically, and I say this for my students in college as well, summers are a really good time to kind of get experience, to feel your way through some things. And in high school, it can be a matter of volunteering in a hospital or other clinical setting, shadowing your pediatrician or other family physician, someone that you may know, just to get a feel for the different types of specialties and really to know, to have a better idea if this is really the career path for you. Medicine is a labor of love. And before you even get to the point where you're doing that laboring, there's the blood, sweat, and tears of just getting through college and then getting through medical school. So take the opportunity in high school to get that clinical type of experience while also doing other meaningful things that, that may not be clinical, that would give you, again, those qualities, help you to cultivate those qualities that would make you a good physician.
All right.
Exploration is really important. I'll just throw that in. When I was in middle school, I thought, I want to help people. I think I want to do medicine. And so I started volunteering in a community hospital. I don't do bodily fluids, y'all. Not even for a minute. Not even for a minute. I have 3 kids. I barely get through the parenting mandatory part. So my ideal day at work does not include sick people and does not include bodily fluids. So really important that I learned that in a very real way, going into that environment and sort of seeing what that was like, right? So if you love science and you want to improve the health of community, I mean, there's so many things to do across that spectrum of health careers, of which medicine is just one. And so, really explore your own development and what you like and what you think your strengths are. And I think it's so funny, Marissa, that you said secret sauce, because I actually have a chapter in my book that's like, it's not what you think, right? And spoiler alert, like the secret sauce is really passion and growth. Like that's it. Like you have to choose things that you're great at and apply your gifts to make the world a better place. And in doing that, you will both find your path and become an amazing applicant who also knows themselves, knows what they want, and you have a mission in medicine that you can write about and talk about that makes you very attractive to decision makers.
So I'm going to put a link in the chat to explorehealthcareers.org, kind of following up on what Sunny was saying, that you have so many different amazing options. And this is a really good website that can help you explore different options.
And then I'm just checking in to let everyone know we're a little over halfway through the workshop. So if you want, I can also help you guys moderate some questions and put them together because we only have maybe 24 minutes. And 2 questions that I'm seeing are from Samile. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right. Do you have any advice for non-traditional students? And then David asked, do you have any advice for undocumented Daca students? So if anyone feels that they can give some advice to that, that would be great.
So
I love,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Katie.
Okay.
I was going to say, I put a thing in the chat for David for undocumented students, and please also feel free to reach out to me and keep in touch with me as well. I work on the national level for those policies, and I'm part of a, Pre-Health Dreamers is one of the advocacy groups. And so you'll find both a community and then you can stay connected, and there's all sorts of development and support. And we can talk offline if you want more specific information about your situation.
Okay, so for the non-traditional student aspect of things, I really encourage you to, whatever college that you enroll in, to connect with the health professions advisor so they can guide you through that process. First of all, is making sure that you identify the specific medical schools that you think you want to apply to ensure that you are getting the courses, the required courses that you need for those specific schools, along with what you need for the MCAT. Sometimes there are non-traditional students who are simply 9-degree seekers who enroll at Xavier, for example, just to take the courses that they need to be able to apply and to take the MCAT. Sometimes non-traditional students are actually degree seeking. Whatever the case may be, what you should be enrolled in a school where you have a health professions advising team that can guide you with this process. I also encourage you to reach out to admissions representatives at the schools that you're interested in applying to connect with them, letting them know what your situation is, so they too can give you advice and insight on the process. It can be a little daunting, I'm sure, for students who are non-traditional, but this needs to be led by passion and sincere interest, just as it does for traditional students. And if it's something that you really want to do, definitely by all means do it. The students coming straight out of college are not the norm anymore in medical school. And so don't be, put aside by that fact. Just make sure you identify the courses that you need to do well when you transition into med school, but also the courses that are required for entry, what you need to make sure you have a strong foundation for the MCAT, and then working in those experiences. Or, if you're non-traditional students, you may already have some clinical experience to show for it, but really utilizing reliable resources and planning accordingly. And I say for students, whether you're non-traditional or traditional, don't get stuck on a specific entry year. Sometimes that entry year you're planning on is not setting you up, not positioning you to have the best application to present. Sometimes you may have the best application, but mentally you're not ready to enter medical school. And so I encourage you to be flexible in terms of that entry year, which dictates the timeline when you need to get classes done, when you need to start studying for the MCAT. Be flexible, making sure that you're positioning yourself to have the best chance of getting in, even if it's a year or two after you had originally thought that you would enter medical school.
That actually leads into a question that Abigail put in the chat about what advice would you give to students that are going to take a gap year or who are thinking about it? And then how does that play potentially into a medical school admission decision? And I know for me personally, I think a gap year can be an amazing opportunity.
Yes.
I've had a number of different students who came into undergrad thinking, I'm just going to go straight to med school. And then they got to, after junior year, and either it wasn't quite the right time for them yet, or maybe you have something that you've always wanted to do. Like I've had students who wanted to do Peace Corps or wanted to do some kind of international work before they went to med school. And so there's so many different things you can do. There are lots of amazing research opportunities, clinical opportunities, service opportunities, international opportunities, fellowships, where these are such great chances to do something really unique, and then you go to medical school. The medical schools are there. They're going to be there. You don't have to worry that they're going to go away, or that if you don't go straight through, that somehow that you're the anomaly and nobody else is in that boat. You know, at a lot of schools now, 60+% are not coming straight out of undergrad, and in some the percentage is even higher. So if you have something that you're really excited about doing, I mean, I've even had students who were athletes and wanted to compete in national level competitions and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think really giving yourself that chance to pursue a passion, or just to do something different for a little bit, to not be a student for a year, get out and communicate and be immersed in different communities that are a departure from what you had in undergrad. So I think it can certainly be an opportunity, and it can be something to really think about.
Yeah, I had a student who became a flight attendant. She wanted to travel, so she became a flight attendant. She deferred enrollment. She was accepted. She just deferred enrollment and flew with Delta for a year.
And I think that just goes to show you there is really there's not one thing you should do. There's so many things that you can do. You can be a flight attendant. You can go to the Peace Corps. I mean, there are so many different things out there. And I think, you know, all of us are older than you all. And so with that, I think comes the idea that life is long. You're going to have such a long career. You're going to have such a long life. And so don't be in a rush to rush that and to get to something, because once the hamster wheel starts going, it doesn't stop, right? You know, you're on there, you're going to medical school, you're going to residency, life starts, right? And so college and kind of taking this time to do the things that when you think back to the experiences that you had, it's the time to do it. And I think, you know, QV kind of hit the nail on the head when it's like, sometimes you may want it to be the right time and it's just not. And so that means that either you need more academic preparation, whether you need more clinical experience. I've been working with quite a few students that were totally on track, and now because of the pandemic, they're not getting the experiences that they want. And that means that they might have to delay. That's a change of plan. And I'm telling all of them, it's not your fault. You did everything right up until now. It is not your fault that there's a global pandemic right smack in the middle of when you're going to be applying to medical school. But that's life, right? And we as individuals, and I think you as future healthcare professionals, if anything about this pandemic is showing us that healthcare professionals need to be adaptive and flexible and willing to take on that burden, right? And so I think you showing that really early on and being able to say, okay, this wasn't my plan, but here's plan B, and plan B is great and it's still going to get me in the right place. I think starting that now is just so, so important. And I think that's what Sunny called it, a growth year. I love that. It's kind of, you know, really taking that time to grow as an individual, grow as a future practitioner. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a great thing.
I will say that the leadership and the contributions that you can make to the world around you start today. So do not have this delayed mindset of, I'm only going to be able to do all the things that I'm destined to do in my life for other people as a physician.
Yes.
It's a silly mindset, and you're not behind. There's no such thing, because this is just your journey only, right? Yes. So, and QV's right, like students will really wreck themselves by saying, well, I have to take the MCAT between these months, and if I don't, and I already registered for it and I can't change it, it's like, all these terrible things happened in your life and you're just going to go sit for it anyway. For what? Well, then I can't apply. Well, if you don't get the score that you show, like, then you can't, I mean, what? But like students get so wedded to their timelines without realizing like there's a big picture here. And so it's just really critical that if you take 5 years, like the average undergraduate to get through, that's fine. If you need 6, that's okay. If you can't go summers because you have to work, I mean, we see all those things on the AMCAS application. So I'll put a link to the AMCAS application walkthrough that I just did that shows you kind of what it looks like. The experiences, the essays, all the background information that we have on you that helps us put your application into context. If you had to work, we're going to see that. If you have financial disadvantage, we're going to see that. Like there's ways that we contextualize your journey, and it's not the same for every person. So I really try to instruct my committees to assess applicants on what did they do with what they had. And if you had a lot and you did a little, that's probably going to go against you, even if you have a lot of bells and whistles. If you just really say like, wow, this person had all the time in the world and their activities are very thin. What were they doing with their time? Versus someone who's working, who has some activities, we say, wow, they really added that in on top of their obligations. So again, once you're there in consideration, we do take your personal journey to heart.
So a question came in from a student who is a senior and recognizes that her undergraduate GPA at this point isn't quite competitive. So in the case of students where they're towards the end of their academic career in undergrad, what are some of the different options that they can utilize to be able to still strengthen their academic record and bring themselves to the point where they would be competitive? So different perspectives.
So I would encourage the student to see exactly where, I'm sorry, I think is it she or he, where the student is in terms of what that lack of competitiveness looks like. So with GPA, I mean, it's just a matter of taking more classes, earning more A's to move those GPA numbers up. And that takes time. The other thing is to perhaps look into a structured post-baccalaureate program that would allow you to get that in a very, again, structured environment where you're not just leaving it to your own devices to kind of piecemeal things. When I advise students, whether or not I encourage them to do post-bac just depends on where exactly those GPAs are. I've had students to have, overall in science GPAs of 3.6, talking about doing a post-bac program or taking additional classes. And for those students, I'm like, nah, you need to just study to improve your MCAT score. I wouldn't pay money to do a post-bac. Now, some students want master's degrees that they care about whether or not they go to medical school. And if you want to pay for that, that's absolutely fine. But in terms of enhancing the application, it's really a matter of seeing exactly where you are and what the best next step would be to remediate that. So if a post-bac, especially the ones that offer guaranteed admission if you meet certain benchmarks, I highly recommend that students look at those. SIU Med Prep is an example of that. We've sent a number of students to that Southern Illinois University Med Prep program. It's intense in that it has upper level biomedical science coursework that you would typically take in med school, and it has very, very extensive MCAT prep. So you're getting the best of both worlds if you're an applicant who needs both of those things. So it's really about sitting back and seeing, okay, these are the schools that I'm interested in. This is what they're looking for in an applicant, and then figuring out how best for you to achieve that goal of improving your credentials. To be open, I say look at both MD post-bacs, DO post-bacs. That's another thing I tell my students when they're applying to medical school. Don't just limit yourself to MD schools. Cast a wide net. If you want to be a physician, you can be an awesome physician, whether you are an MD physician or a DO physician. So I just encourage you not to limit yourself in that regard. But a post-bac may be advantageous, and I'll put the link to the AMC's post-bac information.
Another option, if you need to improve your GPA, I mean, the big picture on a post-bac program or doing coursework, what we mean by post-bac is just after you've closed out your bachelor's degree, whatever courses you do after that go into your MCAS application on a separate line that represents post-bac courses. If you do a graduate program, they will go into a graduate line and will not affect your undergraduate GPA. But if you do post-bac, they will get added into your undergraduate GPA and raise it ever so slightly. So if the goal is to show better performance in science coursework, then however you need to meet that goal, if you need a full-blown program, great. Some students will take extension courses. So what you need are grades and a verifiable transcript in science courses, biology, chemistry, physics, and math, that are hopefully relevant towards what you're interested in doing, which is medicine, and areas that you can cover that will help you perform better on the MCAT, which those areas sort of line up with what you're potentially going to be studying in your first and second years of medical school. So if you don't have the funds, a lot of students I work with here in California will take classes at the community college. Is it the best and most ideal? No, but if you can't afford $50,000 for a post-bac, do what you can. Do well, learn that science, and go get a kick-butt MCAT score and call it a day, because we will see that. That is okay to do, right? So like, what do you have for, if they say, Nakae, I can't quit my job, I have to work. Okay, let's make a plan that includes you working, right? Sets you up for success. What's important that you don't do is do not repeat the same thing that got you to this point in the first place, right? So students are like, well, that didn't work. so I'm going to work full time and go into a postbac program. And I go, well, didn't you work full time when you're undergrad? And now we're in this position where we need to do a postbac. Like, let's pause and say what went wrong. Let's have a correct diagnosis of why we're in this bucket, and then apply some interventions and make a path forward that enacts something different so we can expect a different result and you can be the best applicant you can when the time comes.
So a couple of questions came in about students that may not be able to take the SAT or ACT this year and whether or not they're at a disadvantage. I would say so many undergraduate programs are waiving those in this upcoming cycle for those of you who are in high school and applying to college, and a lot of them are test optional anyway. So I don't think you'll be at a disadvantage applying to colleges. It's more going back to standardized test taking is a skill you ultimately need in medicine because of not just the board exams, but recertification. So it is just something to be aware of. It's not going to necessarily impact your ability to get into college at this point. But again, it is a skill that you can work on over time.
I think too that this is where, you know, and Kirsten and I have talked to F&M students about this. This is really where your decision on where to go to undergrad becomes important, or at least a piece of this. So at Franklin and Marshall College, our students do not take multiple choice courses or, you know, exams at all. I mean, right, for those of you sitting in these seats. And so when I was at Penn, that's all they did. So all of their science courses were multiple choice. And so over time, they learned how to do that. So when they're sitting for the MCAT and they're sitting for standardized tests, that's a skill that they've been cultivating for the last 4 years. Whereas if you go to a college or university that just has different types of test taking, whether that's short answer, you know, whatever that's going to look like, it's important for you to be doing that work on your own. So whether that's, you know, setting yourself up with practice questions from, you know, the time that you're a first or second year, not necessarily for content, but so that you can start to cultivate and grow those skills. So if you were test optional or you did need kind of that extra work on the SAT, ACT, by the time that you go to the MCAT, it's not been 4 to 5 years since you took a standardized or multiple choice exam. So it's important, you know, if your university or college works a little bit differently, that you're kind of cultivating that skill on your own and working on that.
So a question came in about, do we have any recommendations for service and different ways they could get involved? So I'm going to put a link in the chat. I really like idealist.org. It's an amazing website that has internship opportunities, volunteer opportunities, and then also thousands of different organizations where even if they don't have something posted, you can put in your city and state and you'll get all these different organizations. You can filter it by lots of different criteria. And that's something that's really great to be able to get involved in your community. And in terms of service, it doesn't necessarily have to just be medically related. Part of what schools are looking at is, did you get involved in your community? And how are you able to connect with people from all walks of life? So I think as you're looking at service opportunities, don't just limit yourself to only looking at those related to healthcare. Okay, so we had a question, how does race play out when going through medical school, and how should potential brown physicians prepare themselves?
So, I'll answer that one. I'm going to give you the real answer. So medical education was founded by rich, old, white dudes who didn't want anybody else there, like legit for real. Like that's the history. I did my dissertation, a whole chapter on it. What that means is that it is not a place that is built with inclusion and excellence from inclusion in mind. So you will change that space by being there. And that is so critical and important. Why we're all here is because we want you in that space. Mm-hmm. What that also means is that there are going to be challenges associated with how racism is baked into medicine, right? But even like the way we talk and the terminologies. I was talking with some students of color who are fourth years that are applying to the next phase, which is residency. And programs are trying to recruit them and are describing communities that their teaching hospitals are in and saying that there's really great pathology because there's so many indigent patients, right? And these folks are basically looking at it strictly through their own medical and scientific lens without understanding that many of the students they're trying to recruit who are brown are from those communities. Those are our communities. We don't think that pathology is great, right? Like, so there's a disconnect. It's very often not ill-intentioned, right? The intent is not there. It's just there's a lot of ignorance. And so you have to be clear in your purpose and find those mentors. There are people like me, people like Dr. Hamblin and Dr. Like they're there. And so you need to find your mentors, find the people that are going to support you, and just be resilient and strong. You're going to have tremendous opportunities to make a difference and to have a fabulous experience as a medical student. And some of your colleagues will be like your ride or dies at the end of medical school, right? It's a phenomenal experience. But I think you definitely need to prepare, know yourself well, talk about stereotype threat, imposter syndrome, these things that all students face, but students of color tend to face them more because you're not going to see yourself teaching at the front of the classroom. You're likely not going to see yourself on the walls of the school. Like, there are 2 HBCU medical schools, Howard and Meharry. And so if you go to an HBCU medical school, that's a totally different dynamic and a very different environment. Those are phenomenal schools, by the way. But I think you do need to be prepared and know yourself well and really be ready to go in with confidence. And part of that is knowing that you kicked butt as a pre-med and it was your journey and you're ready to be there, right? And if you get a seat, then somebody chose you to be there, right? It's never an accident. So when I was admissions dean, I wrote every single one of my students, all 175 of them, good Lord, a letter with comments from the admissions committee. This is why we picked you. You're not an accident. So when you have that moment where you doubt yourself, you need to pull out my letter and you need to read it. And you need to understand what we saw in you and why we chose you to be there. So once you get yourself there, go for it.
We have 2 more minutes of this amazing panel, so if anyone has any further questions, I would suggest putting them in the chat to the right. And then Sunny and I believe Kirsten already put their emails in the chat. If Marissa and Miss KW again.
I put it in there already.
Okay,
I included it.
Okay, I see yours as well. Everyone should go ahead and stay in contact with them. And do our panelists have any closing words that you would like to say?
I have one thing. Your life experience is your superpower. So there are people who, you may feel like when you start out, there's a bit of a knowledge gap. You can close that knowledge gap. Other people can't close that life experience gap. It is your superpower. You will be able to tell your powerful stories, not just as you're in this application process to medical school, but it will make you a better doctor, more able to connect with your patients, more understanding of their different paths and the different things that are influencing their lives and their health. So never, never forget that. You have that superpower.
I think just going off of that, your path is your own. Don't compare yourself to other students. Don't think this individual did it this way, so I have to do it this way. Know and find and surround yourself with people that support you, that encourage you, that, we had a question about recommendation letters, whether they're faculty members, whether they're other physicians. Hopefully it's your pre-health advisor, that they are supporting you while also like with a tinge of, realistic optimism, right? And allowing you to focus on your strengths and then work on the things that need to be worked on. But don't allow yourself to be kind of put down or to allow yourself to fall off the path. If you get that C, if you get that D, meet with your pre-health advisor, meet with your faculty members and put yourself back on the path. Don't leave it if this is something that you want to do because of that one piece. This is a journey. It sometimes is a very long journey. I've worked with students that this journey took them a very long time, but you know what? They got there. So keep that in mind. There is no awards. We had talked about awards earlier. There's no awards for getting there first. Everyone gets there at their own time. So keep, your life experiences, your situation, your own path in mind, and just forge ahead.
You are absolutely needed. And like this organization says, patients are waiting. They're waiting for physicians like you. And it is such an amazing thing to watch the face of medicine change and our communities be bolstered by the experiences and the amazing physicians that are coming in and that are changing medicine for the better. So if this is your passion, then really stick with it. And I hope that you have an advisor as amazing as these women on this panel today. If you don't, and your advisor discourages you, walk away and find someone who will encourage you. Because unfortunately, for as many students I have that had advisors like Ms. QV, who, you know, sends tons of people to medical school, most every person that I've met in medical schools had an advisor discourage them and tell them that they don't have what it takes, or just look at their numbers on paper and say, oh, this isn't good enough. So if your advisor discourages you, I put this in my book. I have a whole section on working with advisors that talks about how you should work with your advisor, and then a whole thing about when you should not work with your advisor. So, because it's real talk, y'all, it's real talk. So just find people who support you for your journey.
Yes, I echo the sentiments of my esteemed colleagues. I mean, if this is something you're serious about, and I hear passion a lot in personal statements, but some students don't back that passion up. It's kind of empty. But if you're really, really, really passionate and that you have the substance to back it up, you know, the question becomes, if not you, who? Who is going to take up this charge? And I mean, you will be saving lives and impacting lives for generations. There are little boys and girls who are looking at you, who you know, want to be like you and who aspire to be great. And you know, this is a Wakanda and you are T'Challa. You know, you have to look at it that way, because there are so few underrepresented minorities, particularly Black physicians in this country, Black women, and we need you. We absolutely, the future of this country, the future of the world depends on you. We know it's a very serious charge, a real investment of time and money, but it's about that reward, you know, the reward at the end that you see as being valuable for your life. And yes, the challenges will come. They will come and come and come again. But you always have to look at that end goal of you being fulfilled and having a purpose. This is mission-driven work. And if you are not guided by mission to serve others and to do as our foundress at Xavier says, to promote a more just and humane society, then this isn't the work for you. But if it is, by any means necessary, you do what you need to do to make it, because we need you.
Thank you all so much for your amazing feedback. I'm not even a major in medicine, and I learned so much. My sister will be, so I'll just pass it along. And I hope everyone enjoyed this panel as much as I did. Again, look through the chat for everyone's emails if you would like to ask them specific questions. They are all very helpful and very kind women, and I hope everyone stays healthy during these times, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming to the panel.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great to be here.